Larry Kudlow, love to hear from you some reflections on the passing of Margaret Thatcher. I read with great interest your article at Breitbart News today. Talk to us about Margaret Thatcher, what she meant not only to her country but to ours.
Well, you know, this term Thatcherism spread like wildfire during her term because she was the great apostle of freedom and free market economics, right? She rejected big government. She rejected spending and taxing. She rejected the unions. She rejected the state as the driver of the economy, and she was one tough hombre, and she refused to wobble on anything. And, you know, my favorite quote for Thatcher will probably always be that the trouble with socialists is that they run out of other people's money. You know, and I just love that.
I do, too. And you know what? Who is out there making those kinds of arguments today? There just aren't many people. Not
many. You are exactly right. That's the, you know, that was one of the themes of our CNBC show last night is the legacy being held? Are people carrying this message? Because when you look around, whether it's Europe or the United States or elsewhere, everybody is spending like crazy, and they're running up massive deficits like crazy. And they're not shrinking the size of the government. They're expanding the size of the government. That's the problem. I hope this is a temporary interlude myself, but, you know, Thatcher's work should be not just symbolic. I mean, she gives you practical guides. You know, Thatcher privatized all these British-run companies, these state-run companies, whether it was airlines or the British telephone. She deregulated the whole financial sector. Remember the Big Bang?
Sure.
The whole Big Bang, which made London a huge banking center. These are things that are not happening today.
And Larry Kudlow, you mentioned how she wouldn't back down from a fight, and everybody remembers her telling George Herbert Walker Bush not to go wobbly during the first Iraq War. But can you reflect a little bit on how she didn't go wobbly against the labor unions there in England, and how it sort of became a preamble to Reagan's stance against the air traffic controllers?
Exactly. I mean, what Margaret Thatcher did was end the general strike. In other words, if the transit workers went on strike or the miners went on strike, everybody would go on strike, and they would shut down Britain, and that came to be called the British disease. And she broke that. And that really was the opening to the economic growth of Britain. You know, for I think the last 6 or 7 years of her term, the British economy grew by better than 4% per year. It leapfrogged France, and I think became the fourth largest economy in the world. But she broke the Union general strike, just as she broke their socialist tendencies.
You know, I've been watching the economic news, and it's sort of, I've been waiting for this shoe to drop, and I was surprised that it hadn't dropped before now. But the last numbers that came out late last week suggested that, you know what, a tremendous number of people have left the job market. They're not even looking for jobs anymore. And since those numbers came out, we've seen the Dow sort of falling quite a bit. What's your take on how that's going?
No, the Dow's up, actually.
Is it up? I'm sorry.
The Dow's up about 1.5% since the job numbers. I mean, look, I agree. The biggest problem right now, and this is a huge story in the paper yesterday, this business of shifting onto Social Security disability insurance, okay? And what that has done, more people have gone on to disability insurance than have gone into the workforce in recent years.
Yeah.
That is a killer. It's a killer for the economy. Look, if you want to measure GDP, productivity times the growth of the labor force. If the labor force is not growing, or worse, it's shrinking, that means the growth of the economy is shrinking. In other words, you need workers to grow. That's the best way, simplest way I can put it. Because of the advantages and incentives of disability, where they now have lawyers to get people in there, and the benefits are significant, and the eligibility has been widened, what we're seeing is an exodus in the workforce. That's holding down growth. I mean, it's holding down job creation, but it's also holding down growth. Now, I think this is a long-run problem, but the long run is coming home to roost in the short run. I don't think the Jobs Friday was a catastrophe. 4 or 5 months, we've had pretty good numbers, over 200,000. But the fact is it cripples the underlying strength of the economy. The difference between 2% growth and 3% growth is the difference in the labor force growth. But if you're going on disability, then you're not in the labor force.
Yeah.
Then you shift over into Social Security permanently. And this is a very bad thing, very difficult thing for the country. We're going to have to look at this. I don't want to be a meanie. If someone's disabled, okay. But a lot of people think the eligibility is too wide right now, things like mood disorders and other mental problems, and these things really should not be present in the eligibility.
Well, but Larry Kudlow, all those problems are going to be solved this week because President Obama is finally going to release his budget.
Right.
And so we really won't have to worry about any of these unemployment problems or deficit problems. I mean, what do you know about this fabulous Obama budget that's just going to change the world?
Well, I know a couple things. One of them's okay. If he's going to really press home this cost of living adjustment, the so-called chain CPI, that's a modest but significant. That's $125 billion cut in entitlements, if he really does that. So maybe that's a starting point. But there's one thing that infuriates me about this budget, and I don't know if you've gotten wind of the limits, the confiscation of your retirement accounts. Have you seen this?
Oh, well, now I saw this in the Democrats' proposal, but I didn't know Obama had done this as well. Explain it.
Explain it, yeah.
They are saying that these IRAs and tax-preferred accounts are not permitted to finance more than $205,000 per year of retirement. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, except after tax, when your IRA matures, you pay the income tax rate. That would come down to about $125,000. They're saying that nobody should be rich enough or have this much money, that the substantially more than is needed, and they want to find reasonable cutbacks, reasonable limits to how Americans can live in retirement.
What?
It's an incredible thing. They actually want to tell you how you should live in retirement and with how much retirement money.
So people have been people over the last 3 decades have been putting money away and being diligent and putting it in their IRAs so that they can have the most comfortable retirement possible. Yeah. And now they're saying,
do the right thing.
But that's too much. That's too much.
Correct. If it's too much money, and I don't know, it's scored as a $9 billion revenue increase over 10 years. That's not a lot of money. But that tells me somehow there's going to be an additional tax on what you earn from your retirement, from your tax-free retirement, because they don't want you to live too well.
Oh, my gosh.
That's the most incredible thing. That's so un-American, and it's such a confiscation of our savings. And by the way, it's anti-investment and anti-capital formation.
I mean, why bother?
The economy.
I mean, you come to the conclusion of, well, why am I going to all this trouble to save for my retirement?
Right. Because Social Security is going to be there for you, so why worry about saving anything else?
Well, this is income leveling and redistribution and taxing the rich. But it's also anti-capital formation. It's anti-growth. Because when you're saving that money, it gets invested someplace in a company, and it creates jobs. This is an insane idea. I don't believe it has any legs, but they are putting it in the budget. This is state-run redistribution, pure and simple. It's an incredibly bad piece of policy.
Larry Kudlow, thanks for bringing it to our attention, and when the budget is released, we will be all over that here on Mornings on the Mall. Thanks so much, Larry.